Good morning, Praggies, and welcome back to another episode of Pragmatic Optimists, where we're going to do our best with the optimism part today, talking about Donald Trump's continued strikes in the Caribbean, attacking Venezuelan fishermen, murdering people without any type of authorization of use of force, and without any morality, honestly. Like, that feels more important to me than the legal aspects of these ongoing strikes in Venezuela, in the Caribbean broadly. But they're having major implications for American intelligence and really American kind of reputation globally in terms of diplomacy and trustworthiness. So the United States has been pretty much nonstop bombing Caribbean ships over the course of the last several months. Tiara and I have talked about this before. And we have seen responses from not just Venezuela, but also other South American countries condemning this, understandably, because it is the United States drone striking their civilians as they are in international waters or in waters controlled by other countries. But Venezuela itself has said that they are going to prepare for guerrilla strikes against the United States. And it really feels like the Trump administration is trying to pull us into a war with Venezuela, with other South American countries for a variety of reasons. And I want to set that aside and then Tiara kind of honestly focus there on the idea of strategy. But before we do so, we do want to flag for you that the United Kingdom has suspended certain intelligence sharing with the United States because of these ongoing strikes on civilians, Venezuelan civilians. And because I think if we distill it all the way down, our allies feel like they can't fucking trust us because of who we have currently in leadership and the way that they have decided to move when it comes to U.S. military force.
And Rachel, I argue it's not just they feel like they can't trust us. They have credible evidence to suggest that the United States is indiscriminately, without due process, attacking ships in the Caribbean, that we cannot say what they are carrying, who are the people on those ships. And to date, more than 70 people have been killed in these unauthorized attacks on ships in the Caribbean. So
not Venezuela hitting them with like the toxic boyfriend. Like, I'm sorry you feel that way. You're exactly right. Like, that's because they cannot trust us anymore. And I would also say that extension of kind of ignoring due process rights is connected back not just to the United States' current quote unquote immigration enforcement or forced disappearances of people off the streets, but also the United States' support of military powers that are indiscriminately murdering civilians, whether that is through their support of the United Arab Emirates, who is funding the RSF, killing civilians in Sudan, whether that is military support for Israel, whether it is allowing Russia to expand its operations in Ukraine. We are quite simply not we don't give a shit about due process rights in the United States anymore. And our allies, who also sometimes have some questionable military decisions, are right to point that out. So I want to turn to you, Tiara. What do you think about the strategy? Why is Trump doing this?
Because he's been given unfettered access during the government shutdown, where the Congress has ceded all of their powers to him and have been effectively no obstacle to any of his illegal activity. You have Mike Johnson, a Republican from Florida, who's just decided that in his unprecedented leadership, as the House was not able to find an actual leader years ago, he was, after 12 votes, I think, finally elected as the new leader of the Congress as the speaker, second in line to become the president should anything happen to the very elderly octogenarian that is Donald Trump and the unhinged but relatively healthy J.D. Vance. We have Mike Johnson as someone who will be the next the commander-in-chief of the United States, who effectively ceded over all of his power to Donald Trump during the 50 plus day, because it is still ongoing, government shutdown. And so when you have a branch of government, a branch of equal government that has said, we, Congress, have the power to declare war, and we have given that power over to the president, who has shown time and time again, he does not care about due process, he does not care about the courts, and he does not care about any accountability measures. You are going to continue to see abuses of power from this office, because that is what we have now set up in the United States of America, where one group is willing to cede over all of their powers in our government at the expense of American people, simply because one unhinged octogenarian does not like the way that rules are set up in the international space and within our own country. And I think one of the things that's disappointing, I went off on a rant the last time we talked about it. Whatever happens overseas and whatever we allow to happen in another country is going to be the expectation that we have on our own turf here. And so we've already seen a lack of due process with these ICE agents who are in communities who are literally terrorizing neighborhoods and Americans and people who are on American soil simply because they can. And we see the indiscriminate bombing of ships in the Caribbean that threatens the United States security, that threatens American citizens. And this already caused Venezuela to say that they are going to prepare for guerrilla attacks. Colombia, the country, has also said that they are going to withdraw from intelligence sharing with the United States. The UK, one of our strongest allies, has also said that they are no longer going to be sharing intelligence with the United States in the same capacity. These are consequences, and I think that is some of the optimism I will share here, is that the world stage is not normalizing this. We might be normalizing this in the United States, and some of our leaders might be normalizing this and or conceding their power and their voices, but the world stage is still holding the United States at a distance. We also have COP30, which is happening right now. The United States is not heavily involved with meeting climate targets, and has also stated that under Trump 2.0 that they are going to withdraw from the climate agreements. And so at the world stage, they know that the United States is no longer a player in a lot of these decisions. And I think this might finally be the wake-up call that many of us need in order to see that while we might try to normalize it through legacy media and through mainstream media, the rest of the world is not having this. I think this is maybe an inflection point. I hate to say that because we still have so much left to go in this world. But I think it is, for me, one of the hardest things that we have to contend with is that we have allowed this narrative that Venezuelan ships carrying drugs are what is causing the United States to be threatened by other world powers or to be threatened by outsiders. But the real threat to Americans and to American democracy and to our country is the commander-in-chief right now, who is threatening Americans every day by his illegal actions and by every single thing he's putting out on the international stage. And so while so many people have been desensitized, and I think the first 3 strikes were like in September, we are now upwards of 15 strikes, I believe, in the Caribbean, and we're upwards of 70 people killed in these attacks. Each one of those is a devastating loss, and each one of those is an illegal act that we will be eventually held accountable for at the world stage. And that is a threat to American security and Americans' legitimacy on the world stage.
And I think, unfortunately, the United States is often not held accountable for its violations of human rights on the world stage. But I think that your point about an inflection point is well taken, because the United States has operated, and not just the United States, but the vast majority of players on the international stage with heavy colonialist histories and thus disproportionate power in the world. These countries have gotten away with overreach over and over again. And I think that we're seeing that happen in South America at a time when power dynamics have shifted quite a bit. And South America is not going to be pushed around in the same way that it historically has been. And I just hope that if Venezuela, first of all, I hope that Venezuela does not actually engage in guerrilla attacks on the United States, but it's hard to say that they're not entitled to do so, given the fact that we have been bombing Venezuelans for X amount of time. And I hope that if that happens, people are not blind to the fact that this is a response to actions that the United States is taking against people that are just like them. And that is kind of the history of a lot of violence against Americans and other Western colonialist powers, is that all of this violence perpetrated by the United States tends to happen out of sight, out of mind. And so it's very reminiscent of kind of the war in Iraq and this idea of, why do people in the Middle East hate us? Because Americans are unaware of a history of American interventionism that has murdered people in the Middle East over and over again, and don't really seem to care. And so I think that the response that we're seeing from, number one, and I don't think that Americans understand just how devastating the impacts on them could be if Donald Trump decides to continue to pick a fight with a country that is this close in proximity to the United States. Because historically, American presidents who are targeting, which just has to be said, Venezuela is a very oil-rich country. And historically, when American presidents have targeted oil-rich countries for intervention in the modern age, they have been very, very far away and not situated in a place where those countries could actually fight back on American soil or target people on American soil. And that is not the situation that we are finding ourselves in. And we should care about this because it is wrong and just so egregiously wrong that Donald Trump is murdering Venezuelan fishermen over and over again. But if that is not enough to get people to care, they should really fucking care about it, because this is a country that could actually hit back on American soil in a way that Americans have no concept of, frankly, because there has not been a real war on U.S. soil since the beginning of the 20th century with the Mexican-American War. And so all of that to say, I agree with you that there's some optimism to have real conversations here about not just American, but broadly powerful country interventionalism in other countries in the global South. But I think that one of the most important things, I am concerned by how little coverage this is getting, because I think that it is perhaps the international issue in this moment for the United States. And so like, share, subscribe these videos, make sure that people in your community know what's happening at the hands of the Trump administration using your tax dollars to Venezuelan people and South American people. And follow along with us here on Legal AF, on the Midas Touch Network, on YouTube, on Substack, on personal social media, because we're going to continue to pay very close attention to this. We'll see you soon.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.